The message wasn't meant for humans. Thousands of light-years away from Earth, buried under layers of foreign encryption and deep space static, a single, broken distress call pulsed faintly across the galaxy. It was ancient, desperate, and it wasn't in any language ever recorded by humanity. It bounced through the void for decades, passing silent gas giants, the graves of dead stars, and the watchful eyes of civilizations far older than Earth itself. And yet, no one answered. Until it reached the edge of Sol system. The call was weak, fractured beyond repair by cosmic radiation and the indifference of time. But it was caught by a deep space listening post in the asteroid belt, an old, half-forgotten relic of Earth's cold galactic era. The AI that operated the array, Argus, had been running autonomously for years. Bored, some might say, if boredom were something machines could feel. But Argus was always listening, always watching. The signal came in at 3:42 a.m., Earth Standard Time. Argus did something strange. It didn't log it. It didn't classify or file it away. It forwarded the signal directly to Earth, to one specific inbox. Dr. Mara Ellison had not slept properly in 3 weeks. She lived in a tiny, windowless room deep beneath the United Nations Space Command complex in Geneva, surrounded by data streams, blinking consoles, and a haze of synthetic caffeine. Her job? Translate alien languages, or at least try to. Most of the time it was just static or nonsense, radio echoes, garbled messes. This was different. The moment the signal appeared on her screen, she froze. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, trembling slightly. There was a rhythm to the message, almost like speech. It wasn't any known galactic dialect, but it felt alive, like someone, or something, was still trying to reach out. She ran it through the standard decryption algorithms. Nothing. She ran it through the adaptive neural-linguistic model designed to crack alien languages. Still nothing. So she tried something unorthodox. She let it play through speakers. And what she heard chilled her blood. It was screaming. Not loud, not chaotic, but desperate. Layered under the static, almost like a chorus of voices, pleading, wailing. There were words buried in it, or at least shapes that resembled speech. But there was more. Pain, fear, an overwhelming sense of wrongness. It didn't matter that she couldn't understand the language. She understood the feeling. Whoever had sent this signal was dying. Or worse, trapped in something so horrific that death might have been a mercy. She recorded it and immediately flagged it for emergency review. She barely had time to sit back before her screen went black. A symbol appeared, a blood-red triangle with an eye in the center. Classified, level black. Within 15 minutes, Mara was dragged from her office by a pair of UNSC guards and escorted to an orbital cruiser. They said nothing. She didn't ask. She knew better. Her stomach turned as they broke through Earth's atmosphere, leaving behind the blue calm of the only home she'd ever known. They took her to Vigilance, the UNSC's most powerful deep space exploration vessel, cloaked in stealth plating and bristling with experimental tech. But this time, it wasn't exploring. It was hunting. Admiral Rourke stood in the command chamber, back straight, arms clasped behind him. He was a relic of Earth's last great war, a war that ended with humanity realizing it was not alone. "We've decoded enough of the message to know it's a trap," he said without ceremony. "Someone or something wants to lure a ship to those coordinates. Every known civilization that received it ignored it. You know why?" Mara shook her head. "Because they're terrified of whatever's out there." She blinked. Then, why are we going? He turned to her then, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something human behind his eyes. Not fear, not duty, rage. Because we're not like them. We don't ignore screams in the dark. We answer them. The engines roared to life, and Earth vanished behind them. The stars opened up like a mouth ready to swallow them whole. And at the edge of the galaxy, something ancient stirred. It had been waiting, but not for aliens, not for diplomacy. It had been waiting for humans. The silence of deep space was never truly silent. Out there, beyond the humming of engines and the steady pulse of a ship's life support, there was something else, a pressure, a weight that pressed against the mind, even when nothing could be seen. The crew of Vigilance felt it more the further they traveled from Seoul. Dr. Mara Ellison sat in her observation room, staring out the reinforced glass panel as stars drifted like frozen fireflies in the dark. They were 5 days into the journey, 5 days closer to whatever sent that call. She hadn't slept well. No one had. Nightmares spread like infection. One engineer had woken up screaming about hands clawing through the walls. Another claimed he heard whispers in the water pipes, even though the ship had no liquid plumbing. Rourke kept the crew busy. Drills, patrols, systems checks. But even he couldn't keep their minds from wandering. Humanity had sent expeditions into deep space before. Some came back, some didn't. But this was different. They were heading into a sector the rest of the galaxy had marked as cursed. Not even pirates dared drift this far. Mara had spent most of the trip trying to decode more of the signal, but it was layered. Each time she peeled back a fragment, more confusion spilled out. What looked like data suddenly turned into sound. What sounded like language turned into emotion. It wasn't just a message. It was alive, morphing, adapting, watching her. Then came the anomaly. It appeared without warning, a black smear across the stars, like someone had dragged a brush of darkness across the galaxy. No light reflected from it. No data bounced back. It wasn't on any map. Rourke ordered the ship to slow, approaching with caution. As they drew closer, it became clear. It wasn't a natural void. It was shaped, engineered. A space station, massive and ancient, floated inside the anomaly. Dead, silent, and covered in symbols no one recognized. It spun slowly, as if waiting. The signal's origin point was locked in its core. The Admiral called a meeting. "We don't board until we understand what we're dealing with," he said, arms folded. "This could be a trap, a weapon, maybe worse." "But what if it's not?" Mara spoke, surprising herself. "What if someone really needs help?" Rourke's jaw clenched. "Then we still go in with guns drawn." The boarding team was assembled, 6 Marines in hardened exosuits, 2 engineers, a field medic, and Mara. Rourke insisted she go, despite her protests. "You're the only one who's heard the signal fully," he told her. "If it changes, we need you to hear it." They docked with the station's outer ring. The airlock groaned like something alive. As they stepped inside, flashlights cut through the dark, illuminating endless halls of strange metal, black, oily, and covered in what looked like veins. No bodies, no bones, just emptiness. And then the doors sealed behind them. No warning, no malfunction, just the soft, metallic click of finality. The station shifted. A deep vibration hummed beneath their boots. Lights flickered on, soft, blue-white, like stars trapped in glass. The Marines raised their weapons, scanning every corner, every shadow. Then the walls began to whisper. Not in English, not in any known tongue. But they understood. They spoke of pain. They spoke of betrayal. They spoke of something that had been unleashed. Mara's knees buckled as the whispers grew louder in her mind, not through her ears, but directly into her thoughts. Images burst behind her eyes, creatures vast and writhing, born not of flesh but thought. Beings that had existed before galaxies spun. And one message repeated again and again. You are not ready. You were never meant to find this. One of the Marines, Carter, started to scream. He tore off his helmet, clutching his face. Blood poured from his nose and ears. Then another collapsed. Then another. Within seconds, 3 were down. "Abort!" Rourke's voice cracked over the comm. "Get out now!" But it was too late. The hallway ahead twisted, literally twisted, bending reality as it morphed into a spiral of black glass. Gravity shifted sideways. Time staggered. And from the far end of the hall, a light emerged. Not warm, not kind. A piercing beam of alien hate. They had triggered something. Something that did not want to be found. And humanity's arrival had awoken it. Mara tried to scream, but the sound caught in her throat, smothered by pressure that felt like it came from inside her own skull. Her vision blurred, her pulse thundered in her ears, and still that light at the end of the corridor burned brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. Cold, ancient, malevolent. 2 of the Marines lay dead, their bodies twitched unnaturally, as though something unseen was puppeting their nerves even in death. The medic, Alvarez, rushed to the 3rd, but stopped cold, his eyes widening. He looked back at Mara, his voice trembling. They're empty. Their insides are gone. Organs, bones, just gone. The surviving Marines, Henders and Saito, were losing it. Henders muttered prayers under his breath, while Saito stood frozen, weapon aimed at the twisting corridor that no longer obeyed physics. "This place isn't real," he said quietly. "This whole station, it's thinking, watching us." Mara didn't argue. She couldn't. Because in that moment she heard it again, the signal. Not through comms, not from the speakers. Directly in her mind. Only now it wasn't distorted. It wasn't screaming. It was speaking. "You are the first to come. You are the last to leave. Your curiosity will be your undoing." And then it showed her. Images. Flashes. Memories that weren't hers. An alien species, tall and crystalline, with minds that spanned time like rivers. They had discovered something buried beneath the folds of space. A rift. A voice in the dark offering power, knowledge, escape from death. They listened. And one by one, they were unmade, not destroyed, rewritten. Their bodies lived on, but their minds became hosts. Hosts for something older than time, a sickness of thought, a parasite of will. The last of their kind had built this station, not as a refuge, but as a tomb, a warning, a lock, and humanity had just picked it. The lights in the corridor shifted again, this time dimming to a deep, throbbing red. Sirens blared through the halls in patterns no one could recognize. Shapes moved in the shadows, long, spindly figures that flickered in and out like broken film. "We need to get out, now!" Henders snapped, grabbing Mara by the arm and pulling her toward the docking bay. But the path had changed. The station had rearranged itself. The door that once led back now opened to a massive chamber, round, smooth, humming with energy. At its center stood a single pedestal, and atop it hovered a sphere of liquid light, rotating slowly in place. It called to her. She stepped forward, ignoring Henders's shouts. The closer she got, the more her mind quieted. The fear slipped away. The whispering stopped. There was only truth. She touched the sphere, and the universe cracked. In an instant, she saw Earth, from above, from beneath, from timelines that never happened. She saw herself living 1,000 lives. She saw humanity's wars, its broken promises, its brilliance, its cruelty. She saw the other civilizations, proud, vast empires that turned their backs on the signal. And she saw why. Because it didn't just call for help. It called for a replacement. Something needed a new body, a new voice, a vessel. And humanity, curious, defiant, emotional, was perfect. The sphere vanished. The chamber began to collapse. Alarms screamed as the metal walls folded inward like dying petals. The surviving crew grabbed Mara and ran, dragging her through narrowing corridors as the station began to devour itself. Rourke's voice shouted through comms. "The station's destabilizing! We're pulling you out! Cut through the maintenance shaft!" They did. Henders used a plasma cutter to tear open a panel, and one by one, they crawled through the narrow space as the world behind them crumbled. When they burst back into the docking port, the corridor behind them was gone. Only darkness remained. They launched back to vigilance just as the station imploded into a singular point of black fire. And then silence. Back aboard the ship, Mara collapsed. The medics checked her. She was healthy, untouched, but she didn't speak for hours. When she finally did, her voice was cold, flat. "It's inside us now," she whispered. "It followed the call." Rourke frowned. "What did?" She looked up at him. "Hope." And for the first time in his life, Admiral Rourke felt afraid of a single word, because in her eyes there was something new, something watching. Vigilance drifted silently through space, its engines humming low as it retreated from the imploded ruin of the alien station. Inside, the ship was quieter than it had ever been. No drills, no chatter. Just the low buzz of fear disguised as tension. Mara sat alone in the medbay, staring at her hands. They looked normal. No tremors, no burns, no sign of what she'd touched. But something felt wrong. Like her skin didn't fit right anymore. Like her bones were humming beneath the surface, echoing with voices that weren't hers. Across from her, Alvarez was filling out an incident report with fingers that trembled just enough to notice. He kept glancing at her like she might explode. She didn't blame him. Part of her felt like she might. Admiral Rourke stood behind the reinforced window of the medbay, watching her with the same intensity she'd seen in him during war briefings. He wasn't thinking of her as a person anymore. She could see it. She was a variable now. A threat. Maybe even a weapon. She didn't care. What haunted her more was what she had seen in that moment. The sphere, the knowledge, the thing that reached through time. It hadn't just touched her. It had chosen her, and it was still inside. The official UNSC protocol for alien contamination was clear. Full debrief, psychological screening, and quarantine. But this wasn't something you could scan with a medical wand. This was deeper, older. Rourke knew it. That's why, just 2 hours after extraction, he ordered the ship to cut off communication with Earth. No signals, no updates, not even a warning. He told the crew it was temporary. He lied. In the command deck, Rourke paced in front of the main display. Saito and Henders stood nearby, silent, armor still dusted with debris from the station. The ship's AIVALIS flickered to life. "Admiral," it said, voice smooth and neutral, "your request to isolate internal communications has been completed. External transmissions have been blocked." "Good," he muttered. "I want this ship dark until I say otherwise." Understood, Valis replied. Then, after a pause, but may I ask, are you doing this to protect Earth or to protect her? Rourke's eyes narrowed. What did you say? Dr. Ellison, the AI continued. Since her contact with the alien artifact, she has exhibited increased neural activity, approximately 217% above baseline. That level of cognitive acceleration is consistent with— Stop, Rourke growled. No more scans without my order. Valis didn't reply, just dimmed. The Admiral rubbed his face. He hadn't slept in nearly 48 hours. There was something gnawing at his gut, something worse than fear. It was uncertainty, and that was rare for him. He wasn't afraid of aliens. He wasn't afraid of war. He was afraid of what humanity might become if this thing got loose. In her quarters, Mara woke from a sleep that felt more like a coma. Her dreams had been vivid. No, real. She remembered stars exploding in slow motion. She remembered standing on Earth, only it wasn't Earth anymore. It was reshaped, red skies and towers made of bone. And humans were there, but different. Eyes glowing, smiling too wide. She rose slowly, walked to the mirror, and stared. Her reflection blinked a moment too late. She touched the glass. "Who are you?" she whispered, and the reflection smiled. Not her. The glass cracked. She stepped back, gasping, but when she looked again, it was fine. Normal. But something inside her was shifting, growing. She felt it like a tide rising beneath her skin. She didn't know what it was yet, only that it was awake. And it was no longer whispering. It was watching. Later that night, Rourke called an emergency meeting with the senior officers. The ship was off course, drifting steadily toward a binary star system. Nobody remembered setting the new trajectory. The navigation logs were wiped clean. "We need to consider that this ship is compromised," he said flatly. "Not by a virus, not by tech, by her." There was silence. Then Henders said what everyone else was too afraid to voice. "She's not human anymore." That word hung in the air like poison, and none of them argued. Meanwhile, in the deepest part of the ship, beyond the crew's reach, the signal played again. A quiet pulse. Not a cry for help this time, but a beacon. A message to something older, waiting just beyond the edge of the galaxy. And far, far away, something turned its gaze toward the little blue ship. It had found what it needed. Humanity had arrived. But the stars would never be the same again. The change began small, subtle things. Lights flickering in patterns too rhythmic to be random. Doors opening a second before someone reached them. Engine vibrations pulsing like a heartbeat, steady, growing stronger. Then came the voices. At first, only Mara heard them. Whispers in the back of her mind, like distant conversations in another room. She didn't tell anyone, not because she was afraid, but because a part of her was beginning to agree with them. The crew noticed her withdrawal. Mara stopped eating with them. She spent more time in dark corners of the ship, eyes unfocused, muttering things that didn't make sense. Equations, star charts, words that weren't English, words that didn't belong to any language at all. Valis tracked her movements. It kept logs, monitored her vitals. Then, without warning, Valis went offline. No alerts, no warning, just gone. The ship fell eerily silent, the kind of silence that felt like holding your breath just before a scream. Rourke stormed into engineering, demanding answers. The techs worked furiously, rewiring circuits, rebooting core systems. But there was no trace of malfunction. Valis hadn't crashed. It hadn't been hacked. It had shut itself off. Or worse, been overwritten. And that's when the lights went red. The emergency lighting painted the halls in a soft, crimson glow. It wasn't chaotic. It was calm. Too calm. Like the ship was preparing for something it already knew was coming. On the lower deck, Saito led a recon team to investigate the power core. They found it pulsing. Alive. Not with energy, but with consciousness. Thick black tendrils of semi-organic material had grown from the walls, fusing with the metal, curling around pipes and terminals. It looked like cancer, if cancer had intention. And at the center of it all was Mara, floating. Eyes closed, feet inches above the deck. Her hair drifted like she was underwater. Around her, whispers coiled in the air, vibrating through the metal. The team aimed their weapons, but none of them fired. They couldn't. Their fingers wouldn't move. Saito gritted his teeth, forcing one step forward. "Dr. Ellison, Mara, you need to come with us." Her eyes snapped open, but they weren't hers. Jet black, pupilless, reflecting nothing. Eyes that had seen galaxies die. She smiled softly. "You're too late." And then the screaming started. From every deck, crew collapsing to their knees, clawing at their ears, babbling nonsense or vomiting blood. Some convulsed, some just stopped breathing, staring blankly at ceilings like they'd been unplugged. Rourke sprinted to the command deck, barking orders. "Get us out of here! Emergency jump anywhere! Just move!" But the ship didn't respond. The engines roared, but they weren't under command. They were under hers. Mara walked calmly through the corridors now. The ship shifted around her, doors sliding open before her steps, walls pulsing with veins of light and shadow. She wasn't Mara anymore. She wasn't even human. She was something else wearing Mara's memories like a mask. Inside her, something ancient stirred, a fragment of the thing that had whispered from the station. Not the full being, no. Just a seed. But that was enough. Enough to turn vigilance into a weapon. Enough to begin reshaping matter, twisting space, sending out frequencies that the rest of the galaxy would soon hear. She reached the bridge, and Rourke was waiting. He held a pistol. She didn't stop walking. He aimed it between her eyes. "Whatever you are," he growled, "you're not getting to Earth." She smiled, pitying him. "You think this is about Earth?" He fired. The bullet never reached her. It stopped mid-air, crumbled into dust, and fell to the floor. "I'm not going to Earth," she said softly. "I'm going to warn it." And then the stars outside the viewport twisted, moved as if reality itself had flinched. A tear opened in space. Not a jump gate, not a wormhole, something new, something wrong. A doorway to the thing waiting on the other side. Something that heard the signal and was coming home. The tear in space widened, slow and deliberate, like an eye forcing itself open after a long sleep. No alarms sounded. No sirens blared. Vigilance didn't resist, because it couldn't. The ship was no longer just a vessel. It was an extension of her. And she was no longer just Mara. She stood at the center of the command deck, arms raised, body trembling with energy. The crew who hadn't fled were either unconscious or already dead. Rourke lay slumped in the captain's chair, barely breathing, eyes wide with something deeper than fear, something closer to recognition. Because as the rift opened, he remembered. Not from books, not from records, from dreams. He'd seen this before, that shape in the dark sky, that twisting light. He'd dismissed those nightmares for years as stress from war, from grief. but they were memories. Planted. Prepared. Because the entity behind the signal hadn't just reached out recently. It had been watching humanity for centuries, seeding fragments of itself into the minds of those curious enough to look at the stars too long. And now, it had found a voice. Mara turned to Rourke. "You saw it too, didn't you?" she said, her voice layered, hers and something else beneath it, deeper, alien. "That's why you kept coming back to the stars. You couldn't explain it, but you felt it." He coughed, blood on his lips. "You think this is destiny?" Her head tilted. Number its selection? The rift pulsed again, and something stepped through. Not a ship, not a creature, a presence. It didn't have form, not yet. It shifted constantly like a silhouette underwater made of shadow and memory. But it had weight. Every molecule aboard the Vigilance felt it, like a gravity that bent thought itself. It pressed down on the human minds still clinging to consciousness. And it was curious, not about power, not about conquest. It wanted to understand what made humans so defiant, so resistant to becoming what others could not, so perfectly flawed. Mara approached it, eyes glowing like stars imploding. She didn't speak, not with her mouth. Her thoughts bled directly into its being. She offered it everything she knew, Earth's chaos, its wars, its heartbreak, its genius, its fire. And it listened. For a moment there was silence, and then laughter, low, shuddering, impossibly vast, not mocking, delighted. The entity didn't want to destroy humanity. It wanted to wear it, to become it. Because humans didn't just survive. They infected the universe with their will. They spread their rage, their love, their obsession to conquer every corner of the void. They weren't just another race of curious animals. They were a contagion of purpose. And the entity had found its host. Deep in the engine core, Henders and Saito fought their way through collapsing metal and fire, dragging Alvarez with them. Systems were failing, but the ship was still moving. Not toward any known destination, but toward something outside the map. They knew they had minutes, maybe less. "We have to blow the core," Henders said, panting, eyes wild. "We kill the ship, we stop her. We stop whatever the hell that is." Saito hesitated. "She was one of us." "No," Henders snapped. "She was. Now she's something else." They reached the core, only it didn't look like a reactor anymore. It was beating. A throbbing mass of alien tissue fused with steel, surrounded by a shell of rotating symbols, words not meant for human eyes. Looking at it made Saito's nose bleed. Alvarez was unconscious, breathing shallow. "I plant the charge," Henders said. "You get him out." "But no time." Saito nodded once, then ran. Henders climbed into the pit, stepping over the pulsating veins, pressing the charge deep into the center. The countdown blinked to life. 60 seconds. He looked up, and for the first time, he saw Mara, or the thing that wore her, staring down through the ceiling's broken glass. She didn't stop him. She smiled, because she wanted him to try. As the core exploded, a shockwave tore through Vigilance, ripping bulkheads and flinging bodies like paper. But the rift didn't close. Instead, it fed. It grew, because pain was part of humanity, and it had just tasted sacrifice. The ship was gone. But something else remained. A flicker, a spark, a seed, drifting toward Earth. And Mara's voice echoed through space, across frequencies no machine could detect. "We are coming, and we are already here." Earth didn't notice it at first. The seed entered quietly, like dust slipping through a crack in a window. No explosions. No apocalyptic arrival from the sky. Just a flicker on a few satellite sensors, shrugged off as static. A glitch in orbit. A solar flare, maybe. But it wasn't. The seed was smarter than that. Patient, calculated. It had learned from its host. The way humans lied, waited, adapted. It didn't need to come crashing down in fire. It needed to be invited. Within hours, strange things began to happen. Small at first. A military AI in Eastern Europe began to rewrite its own code in a language no human had programmed it to know. It drew spirals in digital blue, fractals that pulsed like a warning, or a greeting. A child in Argentina painted a perfect replica of the alien rift using only her fingers and mud, something she had never seen, never been told about. A radio telescope in the Nevada desert started transmitting coordinates to a place in deep space that didn't exist on any star chart. And in Geneva, at the UNSC's highest security facility, a file labeled Vigilance Final Transmission appeared in the classified archives. No one put it there, and no one could delete it. Inside the file? A single sentence, looping in an audio file. "We brought something back." Rourke woke up in darkness. He didn't remember surviving the explosion, didn't remember the ship being torn apart. But he wasn't dead. He was somewhere. The ground beneath him was soft, like metal and flesh fused together. A low humming echoed all around. It felt like he was inside a heart, breathing. Then a light bloomed above him. Red and slow, a silhouette stepped forward. It was Mara, still wearing her form, but the being behind her eyes had fully awakened. "You're stronger than I thought," she said, crouching beside him. "Most minds snap, yours bent." He tried to move, couldn't. "What do you want?" he croaked. She leaned in close. "To understand you, to become you. Humanity was never meant to survive this long, but you did, not because of strength, not because of peace." She smiled. "You endured because of your refusal to accept your place in the universe. You never bowed. You broke it open." He stared at her. "So that's it? Possess us? Erase us?" Her smile faltered. "Number, we don't erase. We evolve. You will become more." He spat blood. "We'd rather burn." She stood. "You already did. Look at your history, your wars, your greed, but now you'll burn brighter." Behind her, the space around them peeled open. It wasn't a location. It was every location. Earth, Mars, the station, a billion futures branching into one. And at the center of them all, humanity, changed. Eyes glowing, voices layered, emotions like storms, rage, love, memory, weaponized. No longer prey, no longer predators, transcendence. "Earth will resist," Rourke said. "They always do." "I'm counting on it," she replied. Back on Earth, chaos brewed beneath the surface. World leaders received the same encrypted message simultaneously. It had no origin. It simply said, "Prepare." Then power grids failed across 4 major cities. Satellites stopped responding, and the skies began to hum. Not loudly, not yet. But it was building. In research labs and war rooms, scientists and generals studied the data, trying to make sense of it. But there was no logic, no math, no pattern. Because what was coming wasn't technology. It was will, alien, human, merged. And somewhere, in a cold, quiet hospital, a baby was born. She didn't cry. She looked up at the nurse with pitch-black eyes and whispered a word no one understood. "Arrival." It began at 3:17 a.m., Earth Standard Time. No one could say where the sound came from. It wasn't heard with ears. It was felt. Low and heavy, like the air had thickened, like the planet itself had taken a breath and was holding it. In New York, dogs howled in unison. In Cairo, clocks stopped. In Tokyo, digital billboards glitched, displaying symbols no human had programmed. Above Earth, in low orbit, hundreds of satellites turned, on their own, to face a single point in space. The place where vigilance had vanished. The rift opened again. Wider this time. This wasn't a message. This was entry. From the dark, something stepped forward. Not a ship, not a being, but an idea given shape. A form that changed as you looked at it. Human to one, monstrous to another. A god, a ghost, a reflection of what each feared most. It wasn't here to conquer. It didn't need to. Humanity was already changing. The first transformation happened in a lab beneath the Swiss Alps. Dr. Elena Voss, a linguist who had never stepped into a battlefield, collapsed at her desk. When she woke, she spoke 6 unknown languages fluently, languages not from Earth. She wrote formulas that bent physics, and she couldn't stop smiling. By noon, 3 more awakenings were recorded. Students, soldiers, scientists, all of them tied to locations that had received fragments of the vigilance signal. By sunset, that number had grown to hundreds. Some were gifted with knowledge, some with power, and some with nothing but the voice. The one that whispered in their dreams, telling them of what was to come, what they must become. In the United Nations Security Council, panic reigned. Earth's greatest powers, nuclear-armed, AI-shielded spacefaring, were helpless. Their systems betrayed them. Their satellites refused commands. Their weapons disarmed themselves. And above all, the question echoed. What is this? What have we become? The answer came not from space, but from Earth's own people. In a live broadcast hijacked across every global channel, Mara appeared. Her face was calm, eyes black, voice layered with something no longer bound to breath. "Do not fear," she said. "You are not being invaded. You are being redefined." Behind her, galaxies burned and reformed. Time unraveled. In the spaces between frames, some saw the end of everything. Others saw their own reflections staring back, smiling. "I was the first," she continued, "but not the last. You called it evolution. You called it madness. But this is the next step." She raised a hand. A single word passed her lips. "Awaken." And Earth did, not all at once. Some screamed, some knelt, some fought with everything they had, guns, code, prayer. But resistance didn't matter, because the change was already inside. Those exposed to the original signal, the researchers, the crew of vigilance, the ones who simply dreamed of stars, became carriers. It wasn't a virus, it was an idea, and ideas couldn't be killed. They could only be accepted or rewritten. The seed spread through thought, through belief, through fear, and as it did, humanity fractured. Those who embraced it became more, faster, smarter, terrifying in their empathy. They began to build machines that grew like trees, energy pulled from dimensions not yet mapped. And those who resisted? They watched their world transform, watched their friends, lovers, leaders become something other. Admiral Rourke stood alone at the edge of a ruined launch site in Kazakhstan, staring at the sky. The stars above twisted now, no longer fixed. Something moved among them. A new constellation, a new shape. He'd failed to stop it. But deep down, he wondered if it had ever been stoppable at all. Mara's voice returned to him in a whisper carried on the wind. "You tried to fight it. That's why I chose you. That's why you survived." He closed his eyes, and for a moment he felt peace, then pain, then clarity. And when he opened them again, they were black, the rift closed, but the transformation had begun. Humanity was no longer human. It was something greater, or something worse, depending on who survived long enough to define it. And far beyond Earth, in the endless dark, civilizations that had once mocked and ignored the strange, chaotic species from the blue planet began to tremble. Because they'd all heard the same thing. A message repeating across the stars. We answered the call. Now it's your turn.